was quiet. Too quiet. A black soldier slowly lowered himself onto a wooden bench. The moment his body touched the seat, his face changed. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the bench. His breath stopped for a second. Then he stood back up. One of the other prisoners looked at him and asked in a low voice, "Why are you standing?" The man did not look back. He stayed at the floor and said softly, "It hurts when I sit down." No one laughed. No one asked questions. Every man in that room understood exactly what he meant. They were prisoners of war. Strong men. Trained men. Men who had survived bombs, gunfire, hunger, and fear. But whatever happened in this place had left marks deeper than any battlefield wound. These black soldiers had fought for their country. They had worn the same uniform, saluted the same flag, taken the same oath. But now, inside this prison camp, they were learning a painful truth. The enemy they feared most was not who they expected. The camp smelled of sweat, dirt, and old fear. Barbed wires surrounded the area like sharp teeth. Guards walked slowly, smiling, laughing, tapping their sticks against their boots. The sun burned during the day. The cold cut deep at night. And still, the worst pain did not come from the weather. It came from what no one talked about. At night, the prisoners lay on hard floors. Some slept on their sides. Some stood when their legs shook too much to rest. Sitting was not easy anymore. For some, it was impossible. When new prisoners arrived, they noticed it right away. Men standing when they should be resting. Men walking slow, like every step hurt. Men who avoided eye contact. No one explained why. They learned fast not to ask. These soldiers were not cowards. They had faced death. But fear lived in this camp in a different way. Quiet. Heavy. Always watching. The guards called them names. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they acted friendly. That made it worse. You never knew what kind of day it would be. Good days were silent days. Bad days started with a name being called. One man remembered the sound of boots on date. Slow. Calm. Like the guard had all the time in the world. When his name was called, his chest tightened. His body went cold. The others looked away. Not because they did not care, but because looking made it real. Time passed differently inside the camp. Days felt like weeks. Weeks felt like years. Pain became normal. Silence became survival. The black prisoners noticed something early on. White prisoners were treated differently. They got better food, better work, less punishment. The guards spoke to them with more respect. Sometimes even kindness. The black prisoners watched and understood. This was not just a war prison. This was something else. Something darker. At night, whispers moved through the room. Short sentences. Half stories. Broken thoughts. Don't fight back. Don't talk. Do what they say. One man tried to sit down one evening. He cried out before he could stop himself. A guard looked over and smiled. That smile stayed in the room long after the guard walked away. The prisoners learned to control their faces. Pain showed weakness. Weakness brought attention. Attention brought punishment. So they stood. They leaned on walls. They rested on one knee. They did whatever they could to survive one more day. One of the men used to be a boxer back home. Strong arms. Fast feet. Now his hands shook when he stood still too long. He stared at his hands sometimes, like they belonged to someone else. Another man was barely 20. He had lied about his age to join the army. Now he felt older than everyone he knew. They did not know how long they would be there. They did not know if anyone would come for them. They only knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened in that camp was meant to break them. Not just their bodies, but their spirit. And the words "it hurts when I sit down" were not about pain alone. They were a warning, a quiet signal, a truth passed from one man to another without saying too much. Because in that camp, the worst things were the things you survived and could never explain. And this was only the beginning. What happened next would stay hidden for years. Before the prison camp, they were just men. Black men with normal lives. Normal dreams. Some came from small towns. Some from big cities. Some worked on farms. Some worked in factories. Some had never left their state before the war. But the war came to them. They joined the army for many reasons. Some wanted respect. Some wanted steady pay. Some believed serving the country would finally make them equal. They put on the uniform with pride. They stood straight. They learned to follow orders. They trained hard. They were taught one thing very clearly. We are all soldiers now. At least, that is what they were told. Before capture, these men marched together, ate together, slept in the same cold fields. When bullets flew, fear did not choose color. Bombs did not ask questions. Death did not care who you were. On the battlefield, they trusted each other with their lives. One man was named Elijah. He was a quiet man. He wrote letters to his mother every week. He told her he was safe, even when he was not. He said the army treated him well, even when it did not. He did not want her to worry. Another man, Thomas, was loud and funny. He told jokes during long marches. He said laughter made the boots feel lighter. The other soldiers liked him. Even the officers smiled sometimes. Then there was Samuel. He was older than the rest. He had a wife and 2 children back home. He joined because the pay helped his family. He promised his son he would come back. They believed the uniform meant something. They believed sacrifice would be honored. Then the day came when everything changed. The battle was loud. Smoke filled the air. Orders were shouted but lost in the noise. Men ran. Men fell. Chaos ruled the ground. Elijah felt the blast before he heard it. Dirt flew. His ears rang. When he stood up, the world felt slow. He looked around for his unit. They were gone. Hands grabbed him from behind. Weapons pointed at his chest. Voices he did not understand shouted at him. He raised his hands. It was over. Thomas was captured while helping a wounded soldier. He refused to leave him. That choice saved one life but cost his freedom. Samuel ran out of bullets. He stood behind a broken wall, breathing hard. When enemy soldiers surrounded him, he did not fight back. He thought of his children. Capture felt unreal. They were searched, stripped of personal items. Watches taken, letters thrown away, names replaced with numbers. Still, they told themselves something important. At least we are prisoners of war. That meant rules. That meant protection. That meant survival. They were wrong. The long walk to the camp began. Hours turned into days. Feet bled. Thirst burned their throats. Anyone who slowed down was pushed. Anyone who fell was kicked. But even then, the worst had not started. When they reached the camp gates, something felt wrong. Very wrong. The guards looked at them differently. Not like soldiers. Not like enemies. Like problems. Elijah noticed it first. The looks. The smiles that did not feel friendly. The way the guards spoke louder, rougher, when talking to black prisoners. Thomas tried to joke. He always did. But no one laughed. Samuel felt a cold weight in his chest. A feeling he knew from home. A feeling he hoped he had left behind. They were lined up. White prisoners on one side. Black prisoners on the other. No explanation. No reason given. Just separation. That moment told them everything they needed to know. The uniform did not protect them, hey. The flag did not follow them behind the wire. They were soldiers when it was time to fight. But now, there was something else. Something less. That night, as they lay on the hard ground, sleep would not come. The camp was quiet, but their minds were loud. Each man thought about who he was before capture. A son, a father, a husband, a friend. They wondered who they would be after. None of them knew yet that soon, even sitting down would become a problem. None of them knew the pain waiting for them had nothing to do with war, and everything to do with hate. The camp light stayed on all night. So did their Faye. The truck stopped without warning. Metal doors opened with a loud crash. Cold air rushed inside. One by one, the prisoners were pushed out. Some stumbled. Some fell. Guards laughed as boots hit the gate. This was the camp. Tall fences wrapped around the land like a cage. Barbed wire sat on top, sharp and shining under the sun. Watchtowers stood in every corner. Men with guns looked down, relaxed, like nothing could touch them. The black prisoners stood close together. Not by choice. By instinct. They felt it the moment they stepped inside. This place was not made to hold people. It was made to break them. The ground was mud mixed with old blood. The smell of sweat, fear, and waste hung heavy in the air. Every breath felt dirty. Every step felt watched. A guard walked in front of them, slow and smiling. He carried a stick in his hand and tapped it against his palm. Tap! Tap, tap. Line up, he said. They lined up fast. White prisoners were pulled away first, taken toward wooden buildings. Some even got blankets. The black prisoners were told to wait. Wait for what? They did not know. Time passed. Minutes. Hours. No food. No water. Just standing. If someone moved, a guard noticed. If someone spoke, a guard smiled. Elijah felt his legs shake. He locked his knees. Falling meant attention. Attention meant pain. Thomas whispered a joke under his breath, but his voice cracked. No one smiled. Not today. Samuel watched everything. He noticed how the guard spoke softer to others, how they avoided eye contact with the black prisoners, how their laughter sounded sharper. This was not random. This was planned. Finally, the guards began calling numbers. Not names. Numbers. Each number stepped forward. Some did not come back right away. When they returned, their faces were different. Quieter. Older. One man came back walking slow. His hands shook. His eyes stared straight ahead like he was no longer there. No one asked him what happened. They already knew better. The barracks were small and crowded. Wooden floors with cracks that cut into skin. No beds. No chairs. Just empty space. That was when Elijah noticed something strange. No one sat down. Men leaned against walls. Men crouched low but never fully rested. Some stood all night. Sitting was avoided like fire. A new prisoner tried to sit. He lowered himself carefully, then froze. His face twisted in pain. He stood back up fast, breathing hard. A guard watched and laughed. The message was clear. Even rest had rules here. Food came late and in small portions. Bread that tasted like dust. Water that smelled bad. Hunger became a constant feeling, like a second heartbeat. At night, the sounds began. Crying. Whispers. Boots walking outside. Sometimes, footsteps stopped near the door. Then someone's number was called. The room went silent. Men held their breath as one of them stood up and followed the guard. The door closed behind him. Everyone waited. Sometimes the man came back. Sometimes he didn't. When he did return, he walked slower than before. His shoulders drooped. His eyes avoided everyone. No one asked questions. Questions were dangerous. Days passed like this. Fear became routine. Pain became expected. Hope felt foolish. Thomas stopped joking. Elijah stopped writing letters in his head. Samuel counted the days by scratches on the wall, then stopped when he lost count. The guards learned their power quickly. They used it carefully. Slow punishment was better than fast. Fear worked best when it stayed. One morning, a guard looked at the group and said, "You boys think this is a war camp?" He laughed. "This is a lesson." No one answered. They understood now. This camp was not about rules or prisoners. It was about control. And control did not need words. It only needed pain. That night, Elijah finally tried to sit. His body refused. His legs locked. His hands trembled. He leaned against the wall instead, staring into the dark. He realized something then. The pain was not the worst part. The worst part was knowing it could happen again. Anytime. For any reason. Or no reason at all. This was only the arrival. What came next would make this feel small. And the camp was just getting started. The words did not come from one man. They moved from mouth to mouth, quiet and careful, like a secret that could not be written down. "It hurts when I sit down." At first, the new prisoners thought it meant hunger, or tired legs, or the hard wooden floors. But after a few days inside the camp, they understood the truth. Sitting was not painful because of the ground. It was painful because of what happened before. Men returned to the barracks different than when they left. Their faces were pale. Their backs were stiff. Some walked with small steps, like their bodies were breaking from the inside. No one needed details. The pain explained everything. Elijah noticed the signs. Hands shaking while holding bread. Sweat on faces even in the cold. Eyes that stared at nothing for long moments. One man tried to lower himself slowly onto the floor one night. The moment he bent his knees, his breath caught. A quiet sound escaped his throat, half pain, half fear. He stood back up fast, ashamed. No one laughed. No one judged. They all understood. The guards did not hide what they were doing. They just did not speak about it. Sometimes they smiled. Sometimes they joked with each other. Sometimes they called it discipline. To them, it was nothing. To the prisoners, it was everything. Thomas used to sit against the wall every night. One evening, he did not. He stood the whole time, leaning on one leg, then the other. When Elijah asked him why, Thomas shook his head. "Not today," he said. That was all. Samuel noticed that men stopped sleeping flat. They curled on their sides. They rested on their knees. Some stayed awake until morning, afraid of moving the wrong way in their sleep. Pain followed them everywhere. The worst part was the waiting. No one knew when it would happen. No schedule. No warning. A guard could call your number after breakfast, or in the middle of the night, or not at all. That uncertainty ate at them. Fear was not loud here. It was quiet. It lived in the space between footsteps, in the pause before a number was called, in the moment a door opened. Men learned to read the guard's moods. A calm smile meant trouble. Laughter meant someone was about to be chosen. One guard liked to talk. He would lean close and whisper, "Be good today." That made it worse. Elijah remembered one night clearly. The room was dark. The air was thick. A guard stopped outside the door. The lock turned. A number was called. Not his. Relief washed over him, followed by shame. He hated himself for feeling lucky. The man who left came back hours later. His face was empty. He did not speak. He did not sit. No one slept that night. Food stopped mattering. Hunger was easier than fear. Pain was easier than waiting. The men stopped thinking about tomorrow. Tomorrow was too big. They focused on the next hour, the next breath, the next step. Sitting became a test. Those who tried learned fast. Those who didn't already knew. The phrase became a warning. A quiet signal passed from one man to another. Don't sit. Be careful. Stay ready. The guards noticed. They enjoyed it. Power lived in the way the prisoners moved, in the way they stood too straight, in the way they avoided rest, in the way they watched the door. The camp had broken something important. Not bones. Trust. Elijah realized the pain was doing more than hurting bodies. It was teaching obedience. It was teaching silence. It was teaching fear without words. That kind of pain lasted longer. Thomas stopped looking people in the eyes. His jokes were gone. His smile disappeared. Samuel began to forget his children's faces. Night after night, the same routine. Boots. Locks. Numbers. Men leaving. Men returning changed. And the rest standing in silence, pretending not to shake. One evening, a new prisoner asked the wrong question. "Why don't you sit?" The room went still. An older man looked at him and said quietly, "You'll understand." The next day, that man understood. When he came back, he stood like the rest. That was how the camp worked. No lessons. No explanations. Just pain. And the words "it hurts when I sit down" were no longer just a sentence. They were a rule. A warning. A memory carved into flesh. And the men knew something worse was coming. Because the guards were not finished. Not even close. Silence did not come naturally to them. These men were soldiers. They were trained to speak, to report, to respond. On the battlefield, shouting saved lives. Questions mattered. Voices meant action. Inside the camp, silence meant survival. The black prisoners learned this lesson slowly, then all at once. The first man who spoke too much did not return the same. He asked why food was late. He asked why his number was called twice in one day. He asked for water. When he came back that night, he did not ask anything ever again. After that, the camp grew quieter. Not empty quiet. Careful quiet. Men learned to talk with their eyes. A look meant warning. A nod meant understanding. A slow shake of the head meant danger. Words were risky. The guards listened. Always. Even when they were not there, the fear of them was. Elijah noticed how quickly habits changed. Men stopped standing close together. Not because they did not care, but because closeness was noticed. Groups looked like plans. Plans looked like trouble. So they spread out. But at night, when the lights dimmed and the guards moved away, they found ways to help each other. One man would quietly pass bread to another who could not stand long enough to wait in line. Another would take the worst work shift so a younger man could rest. Someone always watched the door. Brotherhood did not die. It just went underground. Thomas became silent, but his kindness stayed. He helped men walk back to the barracks. He never asked what happened. He just moved slow and steady beside them. Samuel used his body as a shield sometimes. When guards pushed, he stepped in front of younger prisoners. He took the hit. He never spoke about it. Pain was shared without words. Fear was shared without sound. The guards noticed the silence too. They tested it. They called numbers and waited to see reactions. They dropped food on the ground to see who would rush. They made jokes meant to start fights. Nothing worked. The prisoners learned that reacting was a mistake. So they did not. The silence became heavy. Thick. It pressed on their chests at night. Thoughts grew loud inside their heads. Some men started talking in their sleep. Others cried without sound. A few stayed at the wall for hours. Survival had a cost. Memory began to fade. Faces from home blurred. Voices became harder to remember. Names felt far away. Elijah tried to remember his mother's face. He could picture her hands, but not her eyes. That scared him more than the guards. Sitting was still painful. Standing too long was painful too. Pain lived everywhere now. But the men learned to hide it. They walked slow. They breathed careful. They controlled their faces. Pain that showed invited attention. Attention invited punishment. The camp had turned them into watchers. Every sound mattered. Every movement was measured. Every day felt like walking on broken glass. One afternoon, a guard asked a question. Anyone got something to say? No one answered. The guard smiled. Good. That smile meant success. Silence was working. But silence also trapped them. No one could scream. No one could explain. No one could tell the truth. The world outside did not know. And that was the point. The men understood something painful. If they survived, no one would ask how. If they spoke later, no one would believe them. So they focused on one thing. Staying alive. One more day. One more night. One more roll call. Samuel scratched marks into the wall again. He started counting once more. Counting meant time still moved. Time moving meant hope, even if it was small. Thomas began humming songs in his head. He moved his lips but made no sound. Music helped him remember who he was. Elijah promised himself one thing. If he ever got out, he would sit down. Not because it was comfortable, but because it meant freedom. The silence held them together. It also slowly broke them. And the guards were watching, waiting for the next stage. Because survival alone was not enough. They wanted obedience. And they were about to push harder. The day freedom came, it did not feel real. There was no warning. No speech. No apology. The guards came early that morning. They read numbers like always. But this time, the numbers did not lead to punishment. They led to the gate. The men did not cheer. They did not smile. They stood still, waiting for the trick. Elijah's number was called. He stepped forward slowly. His body remembered pain before his mind could think. When nothing happened, his chest tightened. Thomas looked at him, eyes wide. Samuel whispered, "Stay ready." They were told they were being released. Exchanged. Sent home. Home. The word felt strange. As they walked out of the camp, no one looked back. Not once. The fences stayed behind them, but the fear followed. Freedom should feel light. This felt heavy. They were given new clothes. Food that tasted too rich. Water that made some men sick. Doctors asked questions, but not the right ones. Any broken bones? Any sickness? No one asked about pain when sitting. No one asked about the silence. The men did not volunteer answers. They had learned that lesson too well. When Elijah finally tried to sit on a real chair, his body froze. His hands gripped the sides. His breath shortened. The pain rushed back like it had been waiting. He stood up fast. A nurse looked confused. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, That was easier than explaining. They were sent home as heroes. People clapped. Flags waved. Cameras flashed. The uniforms still meant something to everyone else. But the men inside the uniforms were not the same. Thomas returned to his neighborhood. Friends asked him to sit and talk. He laughed it off. He stood near walls. He leaned on doors. At night, he stood in the dark, listening for boots that were not there. Samuel hugged his children for a long time. Too long. His wife noticed the way he avoided chairs. The way he woke up sweating. The way he stayed into space. He told her he was fine. That was another lie learned in the camp. The pain followed them home. So did the silence. Doctors called it stress, nerves, fatigue. They gave pills. They gave advice. Rest more. Try to relax. They did not understand. Some men tried to talk. They tested the words quietly, like stepping on weak ice. The reactions were always the same. Discomfort, silence, doubt. People did not want to hear that American soldiers hurt American soldiers, especially not black ones. So the men stopped trying. Elijah found work at a factory. Standing jobs were easier. Sitting too long made his body shake. The noise helped him sleep. Sometimes, Thomas stopped joking altogether. Laughter felt dangerous, like it could invite attention. Samuel kept his promise to his son. He came home, but part of him stayed behind that wire. They met sometimes. Quiet places. No crowds. No questions. Just standing together, understanding without speaking. They were free. But freedom felt unfinished. Years passed. The pain faded a little, but never fully left. The fear learned to hide. It waited for triggers. A slammed door. A shouted order. A smile that lasted too long. Sitting became possible again, but never comfortable. The worst part was knowing the truth had no place to land. No report. No record. No apology. The war moved on. History turned the page. But the men carried the story in their bodies. They were alive. That was supposed to be enough. Yet something inside them still waited. For someone to ask the right question. For someone to listen. And one day, long after the uniforms were folded away, that day finally came. The silence began to crack. The truth did not come out all at once. It came slowly, like a wound opening after years of being closed. For a long time, no one asked these men what really happened. The country moved on. New wars began. New heroes were made. Old stories were placed in boxes and pushed into corners. The black soldiers stayed quiet, not because they forgot, but because remembering hurt. Years passed. Hair turned gray. Hands grew weaker. Bodies slowed down. But the pain did not leave. It lived in the way they sat carefully, in the way they stood up too fast, in the way they avoided talking about the past. Then one day, someone listened. It started with one man. Older now, tired of carrying the weight alone. He spoke to a reporter. Just a few words at first. Careful words. It wasn't the enemy, he said. It was our own. The reporter leaned closer. What do you mean? The man paused. His hands shook. His eyes filled with something old. It hurt when I sat down. That sentence opened a door. Others stepped forward. Slowly, one by one. They did not shout. They did not accuse. They told their stories the way they had lived them. Quiet. Measured. Honest. They spoke about the camp. The separation. The guards. The silence. They spoke about pain without details. About fear without names. About shame that was never theirs to carry. At first, people did not believe them. Some said it was exaggerated. Some said it was impossible. Some said it was too uncomfortable to be true. But the stories matched. Men who had never met told the same pain. The same words. The same fear. Records were found. Notes buried in files. Small clues that proved something had happened. Something wrong. The truth could not hide anymore. The men were older now. Some walked with canes. Some needed help standing. Some did not live long enough to see the truth spoken aloud. But those who did felt something change. Not relief. Not happiness. Recognition. For the first time, someone said, "We hear you." It did not erase the pain, but it gave it meaning. Families listened. Children understood their fathers better. Wives finally knew why chairs were avoided. Why nights were restless. Why silence lived in the house. The men were not weak. They were survivors. They survived war. They survived hate. They survived silence. And that mattered. One man said it best. "We didn't want revenge," he said. "We wanted the truth." The truth did not fix everything. It did not give back lost years. It did not heal every wound. But it broke the silence. And silence was the hardest part to survive. Today, their story lives on. Not in pain alone, but in courage. In the strength it took to speak after decades of quiet. In the dignity they kept when everything tried to take it away. They were soldiers. They were prisoners. They were forgotten. But now, they are remembered. And when people hear the words, "It hurts when I sit down," they finally understand what it really means. Not just pain, but a history that refused to stay buried.